Hi everyone. Today we have Zarrar, who's an experienced coach at Interview Query. Today we're going to cover a product case study question that was asked at Meta. So before we start, I'd like to welcome Zarrar. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Zarrar. I'm a data scientist right now, working at Audible. Currently, I mostly deal with the search ranker there. In the past, I came from a background doing cognitive neuroscience, much like Sandeep, where I used machine learning techniques to try to better understand people's behavior, decision making, and brain activity. And yeah, now I'm excited to be doing this mock interview.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining, Zarrar. Before we start with the question, we would also like to know your experience coaching candidates to ACE data science interviews and any particular coaching styles that you like.
I think I don't know if the right word, to inspire people, I suppose, to get them excited, particularly, for questions. Often it can seem like work that you're doing. Here we're going through a case study, so it seems like work, but actually, if you think about it, it's particularly if you're interested in data science, it's actually a lot of fun to start thinking about not just the exact company you're with, but, just companies out there, looking at, what their business models are, how they make money. And it becomes very interesting when you realize how much the business models influence, mundane everyday decisions, like whether someone's ad-based or monthly, subscription model can really change how things work. So I think, getting people excited about the question and thinking about it more than just an interview, but that, it's really a life skill that they're learning, especially with case studies. I think case studies come up in work all the time, but often when we're working, we don't think about it, but we really need to, or we need that skill in our work. And so, trying to emphasize that to the candidate, that it's more than just the interview.
True. That's very nicely put. And I agree that problem solving is an essential life skill, right? No matter what industry and function you're in. So let's get started with today's question. So this question was asked at Meta recently. It's titled Friends versus Posts. So the question goes like this. There is currently a people you may know feature on Facebook.com that recommends people a user might want to add as a friend to their social network. However, internal research shows that users with more friends tend to make fewer posts. So how would you approach this issue? Over to you, Zarrar.
Thanks. So Sandeep, when we, I guess, encounter a question like this, there are a few things we might think about. One thing might be clarification questions, which we might ask to drill down. The other thing we might want to think about is the big picture. Like, what's the business model? What's the what are the kind of metrics that might be relevant? So I think we could start with the clarifying questions, but I'll just start with the business model first, just to think about that. And I think that links to the clarifying questions, as I'll describe now. So basically, Facebook has, many businesses, for instance, I'm assuming this is referring to the standard news feed that people see and that they post on.
Yes.
But, there are other, they have, I forget what it's called, but there's a private Facebook for companies. There's Facebook Marketplace. There's Facebook groups. There's Facebook Messenger. So there are a lot of different elements in Facebook. So here I'm assuming what we'll focus on is the model, the business model associated with, the standard Facebook newsfeed and people engaging. Okay. So with that model, I think generally, Facebook, its goals might be twofold. One, it's just generally engagement, getting people to engage more with their social network and have kind of a delight from engaging in this platform with their friends. So that might be one kind of thing that Facebook's interested in. So that might be related to engagement. So if we're thinking of metrics, then we're thinking of engagement-related metrics that would satisfy this business goal. Another business goal might be related to ad revenue, right? So how is it that Facebook's able to maintain this platform to their customers? And the way they can do it with the newsfeed is through ads. And so the ads, I guess, can come from either companies posting stuff, or I think people can boost their posts to the customers. So let's just stick with the third part, like outside companies have ads on Facebook. I get them myself. Sometimes I'll click them. For me, I often get stuff related to, maybe it's because my background is cognitive neuroscience. I get startups that, have these mind related apps like meditation devices and stuff. So, I might get those. And so obviously what Facebook's doing is they're catering the ads, probably based on my posts and my background to get that. So they're what we might be interested in terms of metrics would be related to ad revenue, let's say, just broadly. But we can specify different types of revenue, like revenue per customer, like the average kind of revenue, and there are other things we can look at too, like clicks on the ads and these sorts of things. But okay, so so we have.
You can. Do you mind scrolling down and adding these points?
Yes. I forget when I start speaking. Okay, so basically, so I discussed there's 2 points to start with. So one is clarifying questions, right, and then the second thing is kind of the business model and peeking at metrics. And then these two I said are they're related in many ways. And so we discussed 2 main models. One is basically improving people's social networking experience on the platform. And so this might be related to metrics related to engagement. So that could be number of posts, which is relevant to this question. It could also be time on platform. And it might even be explicit things like how satisfied people are, like if they sometimes ask people questions, people are on the platform. Okay. And then the second thing is related to kind of maintaining the platform through ads. And then, that might be related to things like revenue, things like clicks, etc. Okay. So now that we have that, let's go into the question now. So now that we have that in mind, because we basically drilled down and said what we're interested in is engagement level metrics that are related to the social networking experience. And we're interested in kind of the ads that people get, which might be related to revenue or clicks on the ads or those. We can stick with those two. Let's just say revenue generated from the ads and click number of clicks they get of clicks per session, let's say. And then for the other one, let's say it's number of posts. Let's start with number of posts, time on platform. I have additional ideas that we might get as we explore it, but okay.
Sure.
So we start out with those kinds of metrics in mind. So now the question asks, basically there's 2 parts to this question. One is that there's research. So 2 parts. So one is research showing, sometimes it's okay to repeat yourself too, right? You're just thinking out loud, showing users with more friends, fewer posts, right? And then
can you scroll down? And you can expand the.
Yes. Let me expand it. Yes. Thank you.
Cool.
I was trying to scroll up to get the thing. So let me just copy this here. So okay. So then the other thing is, we have a model, which we'll show here. So this is the people you may know feature, where it in the kind of friend suggestions, it shows potential people you might want as friends. In addition to the friend requests.
True.
Okay. And so that recommends a user might want to add as a friend. Okay. So now we're assuming here that when the person asks this question, that the issue is that maybe this feature is leading to fewer posts. So I guess that's the hypothesis. I mentioned at the beginning, it's this one doesn't say the hypothesis, but I'm guessing the hypothesis, if we shall state it clearly, is that this friend feature, is leading to fewer posts, right? And that's a problem for both of the things we discussed. That's a problem because it leads to less engagement. To potentially, let's just say potentially less engagement and potentially lower ad revenue. Right. Okay. So that's the 2 parts, and then let's say hypothesis. And so the question we have is potentially here. The product question is: should we, stop using the feature, or should we alter it in some way?
Right. Another thing could be could we sort of validate the hypothesis again by doing additional research?
Yes. That's exactly right. I was going to get to that. Do we need? So the other question is, do we need to drill down further to better understand the problem? And so we can do kind of offline analytics here. And then we can also do what I was getting at with, should we stop the feature or alter? Should we stop the feature? I guess if we just say that, maybe we could do some A/B test. And then the other thing is we could do kind of offline analytics. And probably we want to start with the offline analytics first, just because, that might be, cheaper, but it might. So let's start with kind of what you were just suggesting, this kind of offline analytics. So let's start with offline analytics. Okay. So let me see. So I said so some questions that might be, let's think about, there are a few different directions I can go here. One is to talk about the specific metrics we're interested in for the offline analytics. The other is the specific kind of things we can look at and what questions we can say. But let me just broadly talk about it first, and then I'll drill down. So I think there's a few hypotheses I might have about what's happening here. So I think a bunch of hypotheses might relate to the fact that say it is true that this occurs. So then one way we might know that is that, when someone adds a friend with the feature, we can look before the addition and after the addition, right? And so we can peg that as a moment. And now there are reasons that it could happen. I didn't talk about this, but it could be interesting, the hypotheses. Like, it could be that the reason, if you have too many friends, it's kind of information overload. So sort of some specific reasons. I think that could have gone earlier, but so specific reasons could be that, for why this occurs, could be that, information overload. There could be privacy concerns. You have too many friends, so, you don't want to post as much. You could have content relevancy, so that, because you have too many friends, the content isn't as relevant, so you don't kind of post as much. So we could have this in mind as we look at the before and after. The one other thing we could have in mind too, by the way, is that, is this hypothesis is false, right? And what's one reason for that? It could be that actually overall it is true, more friends, fewer posts. But this feature, helps to select high quality friends. Friends. And so people actually post more.
Makes sense.
Right. So given that, the one thing we'll consider, so let's go with this analysis. So we're doing a data analysis, just looking at, we add a friend, we see before, we see after. And so what are the things that we're looking at? So we could look at, so we discussed some of these. So one is the number of posts. So say we pick a period, like say we do 1 month before, let's just aggregate it. I mean, we can do sliding windows, but 1 month and after. Now, the one thing I was also thinking about is that maybe people have fewer posts, but they still have more engagement. Right. So you could imagine that time on platform is another metric that isn't necessarily related to number of posts. And so this we can also look at kind of in aggregate for 1 month before and after. So I think these two are good. There's more that we can do, but often with the case studies, we want to be simple. But, I could mention that we could look at the number of comments they have, the likes they do. So there are a lot of other things we can also look at. But for simplicity, I think these two are good because they can be opposing. So,
makes sense.
And the other reason they're good too is because time on platform for ad revenue is also related, because the idea could be that if they're on the platform for longer, although they have fewer posts, they actually, because they're on the platform for longer, they're having more engagement with the ads.
Or they're exposed to more ads as well.
They're exposed to more ads as well. Yes, exactly. So they're potentially doing fewer posts because, they're just reading a lot more about what other people are saying.
Right.
which should also be totally good. So what we're interested here then is then we have kind of our metrics. So we could do different kinds of tests, but let's just say we just do something super simple. We just,
Sure.
we collect, we need to make sure that we collect the right amount of data. So we determine some sample size we need. So say for whatever reason, we determine that, 10,000 people is enough to do this. And we might have principled ways to do this, right? We might, based on the statistical power of the test, and we might have existing data that we can kind of determine that. And so we have that route to take. But say we collect data on 10,000 people, and there are things we need to make sure we have 1 month before, 1 month after. And then we also, because we're now determining, so the one thing I was going to mention is that, so one thing we might want to consider is the kind of control condition. So our condition right now is just before and after. So there's kind of one group we have, pre and post. And so for that, I'm going to get something later, but for that, we can just do stuff like paired t-tests, right? We can just say, paired t-test before and after for our two metrics, for number of posts, and time on platform, right? And, ideally with 10,000 people, we'd have a good test to determine whether they're kind of different or not. So the things we're looking at are whether the effect is negative, positive, or flat, right? So if it's negative, then that means that for a number of posts, that means the posts do go down when people use this feature, right? I keep saying it. Negative would mean support. I forget what the hypothesis that feature bad. And so negative for both cases, for number of posts and time on platform. If they're not the same, if the time on platform is greater and the number of posts is the thing that's negative, then that might cause us pause and we might need to further investigate. But okay, so we have positive would mean that they're doing more posts afterwards, they're having more time on platform afterwards. So that supports feature is good. And then the flat actually might support, it depends on what your business model is. And we didn't talk about any guardrails or something. And so we could think of, I'm trying to think what so I guess if we think, so say if it's false, then maybe we want to have additional metrics to see whether other things we're interested in are going bad. But say if everything is flat, then, I guess it's a business decision, like whether you feel like this is a meaningful experience for customers. And so if all flat, so first is look to other metrics, potentially guardrails, and see about that. If all is flat, then it seems to me then it's a business decision about like how important is this feature. So I think that's what we go there. Now the other question, and then the other question we might have is maybe we would want to look at a control group. So say we're looking at a particular time, say we're looking around Christmas, and it so happens that I select Christmas Day or New Year's Day as my kind of midpoint, and then everyone before is before that. So it's the holiday season. Everyone after is the New Year's, and so maybe get a control group that is matched in various demographics and other features, other stats to the first group, to see that it's not just this change is a meaningful change, and it's not just something related to the time or season.
Makes sense.
The fluke to the season. So I guess that would be one kind of offline thing we could do. We could talk about more things that could be done, but let's just stick for that for now. Okay, and then let's talk about the A/B test part. So say, for instance, we find out, actually, we just mentioned if it's flat, then maybe that would be motivating to run an A/B test, right? Because it would be that, we don't know either way, and one reason we might know either way is because this is like retrospective, and we're not actually properly controlling for the effect. So one thing that could happen, right? So one so say it's flat, and there are other problems, right, with offline. So one problem is just that what happens if just by seeing the friend friend feature, people you know, sorry, people you may know, leads to issues. I don't know what it would be, but there's something about just seeing it that's problematic. So it's hard to control that with offline eval. Right. So really what we'd want is an A/B test where we kind of keep the feature. So let's say this is treatment A, and then versus let's just simply say remove it.
Right.
For certain, so treatment B. Okay. So, and then like we said, we would look at here we would look at number of posts in terms of engagement and time on platform. And I realized I didn't talk in the last one about the ad revenue stuff. So this is for engagement, and for ad revenue, we could look at the revenue, just the total revenue, and per person. We could also look at something as the number of clicks on ads per session. So let's say these are our two, and these are for ad revenue. Yeah. So these are the kind of metrics we can kind of be looking at. And we've already talked about how these metrics relate to the larger business goals. So like I was mentioning, we can see here how, because I do think sometimes when people do these questions, at least when I started out, I didn't see how does the business model connect with the metrics? But here we can see that I talked specifically, this number of posts is directly related to this business model of the social network experience. And the second one is related to the ad experience. And so we can see that by having these business models at the beginning, it makes a nice story as we keep going. That we are able to maintain it, and it's very explainable. So so we have that. And so now we're going to need to determine who should this test run on. So let's say, which marketplace? So let's say we start with the US marketplace to start with, just to begin with. It might be easier to instrument that. And then how do we, so decide on the customer base, right? Okay. And then the other thing is, how is it triggered? So this seems also potentially trivial, but you could imagine it's triggered just every session. So you could imagine that each customer sometimes gets it, sometimes doesn't get it. Or you could imagine that we totally remove it for some customers and we totally don't remove it. I could go either way on this, but I think it might be cleaner if we just trigger by customer. Now, if we do that, then remember we have to run the experiment for a certain amount of time. And we need to make sure that if it's triggered by customer, say if we run it for a month, if the customer comes online like the last day of the experiment, it gets triggered for them. So we probably wouldn't count them. So we might want a certain number of days duration for each customer, and we might want an experiment to run for a certain total amount of time. So usually we have duration. So usually we have some estimator, a duration estimator, which I think most big companies like Amazon and Microsoft and different large companies have something where they estimate the power to detect a significant effect. So that here the significant effect is treatment A versus B. And so the power might, the 80% power to detect so something P less than 0.05, but we might also have something like, we might have a practical significance for the ad revenue. We might determine we want it to be minimum. I think for Facebook, I'm imagining even something like 0.1%. I'm trying to think how much, let's say 0.5% revenue. The larger companies, even small percentages translate to huge amounts of money. Percent revenue. So we have this to basically help us determine the duration that we should run the experiment. And then, like I mentioned, we might also want to have a minimum time per customer as well. Because, although we're running the experiment for 30 days, so here I've just said we can do 1 to 4 weeks and use the duration estimator to tell us, the exact amount. And then for the minimum amount of time, I think we just say 14 days, let's say. We just set a flat thing. So I think, I covered the trigger. We have the metrics, and of course we'll want to make sure that it's randomized. And I don't know if we want to check anything else. So sometimes you want to check that, specific demographics are randomized. I don't know if we need to do that here, but sometimes, specific are randomized.
Makes sense.
And then, so in the real world, when you run this, the first couple of days, you want to really check that, say we're doing 50% split. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're checking that it's like a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
There's some things that can go wrong there. I remember for me once we had a problem where robots, which get filtered out, were for whatever reason ended up in one treatment, all of them, and then they got filtered out. And so the percent, so although it was randomizing the IP addresses properly, it was filtering. So we might want to make sure to check check the first few days.
Yeah.
That randomization is proper. And here too, we might have a test to determine if it is unequal, even though we're trying to make it as equal as possible. But like I mentioned, sometimes things happen that are outside our control. So, okay. So I think we, did I miss anything you think with this A/B test or?
No, I think looks good.
Okay.
Yeah. Any final comments then?
So, so basically to kind of summarize it, we've kind of understood that the business goals are kind of ads that are relevant to the user and also more engagement on a social platform. And we've considered metrics that we might consider related to ad revenue and clicks and changes in engagement like posts and time on platform. And then we kind of questioned the hypothesis. We drilled down on what the hypothesis could be, questioned it a little bit. And then we designed two different types of experiments, one offline and one online A/B test to look at whether it's actually true. So we're accepting the research that fewer posts lead, more friends lead to fewer posts. But does this hypothesis that's generated from the research, does it affect our feature? And so, so we had those two things. And those offline and the A/B test will help answer that question.
That's very well put, Zarrar. In fact, I really liked how you summarized the overall problem and the approach and solution you took. So for anyone watching, there's a very good solution and methodology that Zarrar presented today, where he first takes some time to talk about the business model. And especially for folks who are applying for product data science roles, these kind of business case study or product case study questions. Also, you are being evaluated for your business intuition, right? So at the start of the problem is you have an opportunity to showcase your business knowledge or how does the business model work. And as you could see during the entire solution, Zarrar always made sure that the metrics are related to the business model. And there's a clear narrative in terms of the experimental design, the metrics, the kind of tests, the kind of samples we are looking at. So overall, the solution was very coherent. And this is an excellent example for people to follow in terms of answering product case study questions. One more question, Zarrar, from your perspective as a coach, where you advised candidates for such product case study questions. What are some of the common mistakes that candidates make when answering such questions, and how do you coach them through sort of following the same kind of structure that you put forward today?
Yeah, so I think I kind of mentioned it earlier to start with, but I think people miss the big picture part, particularly because it doesn't seem relevant to the question. Why does Facebook's business model relate? And I know for myself, when I started out, I felt nervous because I was like, well, this isn't related. And it feels weird that you're going off course.
Right.
And so I think there is, I actually don't think I've said this specifically to candidates, but I feel like it's just getting over that nervousness of going off track in order to be able to give the whole picture and also to tell the interviewer that you know kind of what you're talking about. Actually, I would say I didn't mention it here, but say you know something about TikTok and you can mention that. You should definitely mention that. I briefly mentioned my work experience that, we had a robot and you should definitely bring that in. So I think that's maybe one thing I might say is that seemingly going off topic can actually be pretty relevant for this question because, like you were mentioning, they're not only interested in you answering the question, but they're interested in your product knowledge, your ability to think through business problems, and also just your knowledge about the business in general.
Exactly. Very, very well put. Exactly. So I agree. Sometimes it makes sense to zoom out and look at the problem from 10,000 feet before you drill down into the specifics, because a lot of candidates, as Zarrar put, might be nervous and want to go straight into the question, right?
Yeah.
And this is a very, very helpful advice. So thank you, Zarrar. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this mock interview on product case study question, which was asked recently at Meta. And with that, thank you for joining, and look forward to having you check out more such product case study questions on interviewquery.com. And all the best to you in your future data science interviews. Thank you.